Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. We are sitting here today with Stephen Foster. His journey from an unsuccessful church plant, a lost marriage, and an abandoned book deal to faith driven entrepreneurial success proves that setbacks can be setups for growth. Now he helps fellow entrepreneurs turn their mess into their message, guiding them to write impactful books, build thriving businesses, and trust in divine timing. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me. I'm definitely excited to be a part of the journey in the podcast today. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you for being here. We're excited to dive into these topics as well. But before we dive into it, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
So this is a character. I used to love watching the show. They took it off the air. I don't know why. It was an amazing show. I mean, maybe a lot of people didn't like it, but I used to love the show Johnny Bravo. And Johnny Bravo, like a lot of times he didn't say much, but he was always trying to prove himself. He was trying to prove himself to people and to the ladies, and he always wanted to present himself as this person that had it all together. And then a lot of times you would see him unravel when he was either by himself, or you would see him unravel even in front of people, where he would kind of stumble over the ideas that he would try to present to people. And I just resonated with that because I kind of seen myself in the younger version of myself, where I was trying to prove this, or I was trying to do this, and I was stumbling over the ideas that I was trying to present to others of who I was. And so it resonated because I seen it and I was like, man, it's funny seeing it in that kind of cartoon, but it's not so funny when you are that person that tries to be bravo in everything, brave in everything, have it together in everything, show that it's all together, when actually it's really a part of a cover up of trying to hide something inwardly. And so I resonated because that was something that I had to overcome and deal with that stage so that life could become bravo for me in the real self of who I am. So that's kind of a fun character that I thought it was funny, but it does definitely resonates.
Thank you for sharing. I definitely like that one, Johnny Bravo. It takes me back a bit. I hadn't even thought about that cartoon in a while.
Yeah, it kicked it off the air. So sad, so sad. Kicked it off the air.
So, just sliding into the topics at hand, how do you define procrastination, and what does it mean to you personally?
Yeah, so I define procrastination as anything that you try to push to the side. I would say procrastination for me is pushing the hard thing to the side to do the easier thing to get a quick result. And so a lot of times people procrastinate on what they appear to be hard, trying to figure out what is the quickest way to get the uh, the fastest route. And I got a better way to say it is that get rich quick scheme or get rich quick idea. And so instead of putting in the real work, I'll procrastinate on doing the real work to try to do the easier thing to get the same result for the hard thing.
No, I like that. I like that. And we all know that there's no one cure or one size fits all sort of solution. But what's been your secret sauce to overcoming procrastination?
Yeah. So the secret sauce is, sometimes people say, how do you eat an elephant? One step at a time. And the best way for me to overcome procrastination is for me. I have to wake up early. I wake up early in the morning and I literally say, hey, today, what are the things that I know that I have to get done today? What are the things that I would like to get done today? And what are the things that don't matter as much to me? And the way that I kind of put them in categories is saying like, hey, what are my top three goals for the day? My top three goals might be like, hey, to work out. And my top three goals might be to start writing. Another goal might be, okay, to spend time with my son. And then I also ask myself, today, what would make you feel accomplished after you completed these things today? And so looking at that, starting my day with that kind of perspective, it helps me to then say, okay, how can I stop procrastination? To say, these are the top three things that I need to get done today. And what are some of the things that don't matter as much? Because what I've learned, if I don't do that, then I allow the things that don't matter as much to overtake the things that actually matter the most.
I like that, setting it out. And so do you write those out, or is it just like a mental list?
So, and that's the other thing. I write them out, and then I also put them in my phone. And so after I write them out, I say, okay, now what time are you going to accomplish these things? And so now I have to set time. It says, okay, at 3:30, from 3:30 to 5 o'clock, I'm going to spend time with my son. Okay, from 12 to 1, I'm going to write. Okay, from this time, I'm going to work out. And then everything else around my day has to work around those things that I know that I need to accomplish for the day.
I like that. And just swinging back a bit, I already know my audience. They're rolling their eyes. They're ready for what I'm going to say next because I always ask it. They say that writing a book is 98% procrastination and 2% doing it. How true is that for you?
I believe it's 100% true. Like, because in the procrastination, a lot of time it's just self-talk. It's telling yourself of what you can't do. And it's self-talk about why should I do it? And the all actuality, you're spending 20 to 30 minutes self-talking yourself. When I teach my clients that same 20 to 30 minutes of self-talk could be the same talk that you give for a chapter or two chapters. Like I actually show how you can write a chapter in 15 minutes. So one chapter can be done in 15 minutes. And so with 30 minutes of self-talk a day, you could actually write two chapters per self-talk. And so that's why it's that 98% of procrastination and 2% of actually doing it, because the more you self-talk, the more time you could have been simply knocking out that thing that you said that you couldn't do.
Wow, I really like that. Let's dive a little bit into your journey and sort of how you got to be where you are.
Yeah. So in 2018, and you kind of started off with the story of, we kind of went back and forth, unsuccessful, failed. But I love the analogy of the, first attempt at failing, first attempt at learning, because even in growing a church and starting a church, like I was young, even in business, there are so many things that people don't tell you that you only learn on the job. Same thing with marriage. Like, yes, there are millions of marriage books, but you still don't learn until you're on the job. Same with being a parent. And so in my journey, very early on, I was in the classroom of learning on the job. And so in growing a business and starting a church and starting a family, these were learning things for me. And going back to connect everything back to Johnny Bravo, like I thought I knew everything. I thought I had everything together. I thought that I was the gift, God's gift to the world with all of my gifts. However, in my learning journey, I learned that there was so much I didn't know. There was so much that I needed help with. There was so much that I needed to mature in, that it actually took me to a place where there's a writer who says he makes me lie down. And I feel like in my journey in 2018 was the journey of God making me lie down so that he actually could restore my soul to the place that I could truly understand my gifts, my abilities and talents weren't in my own self-sabotaging, but it was in the reliance on understanding, growing, developing, strengthening what was already given to me. And so 2018, it took me down that journey of basically losing everything to learn everything that I needed to learn. And so from that I kind of used a play on a word that it seemed very messy at the time. Uh, it seemed very tough at the time. But during that journey, it actually created a message within the mess. And that message was within the message, which really prompted my first book, that whenever life begins to give you raw materials, or when life ever seems like it's giving seeds, or it's giving you trials, or it's giving you some kind of opposition, we need to learn how to take that and create the message out of what may appear to be a mess. And that's what prompted my first book called You're Right on Schedule. Because after going through all of those things, after seeing those valleys and those dips and those ups and downs, it seemed very messy. I was in a very dark place. But during that time, what really helped me with that 2% of not procrastinating anymore was actually taking that messy situation and turning it around and creating a message out of it. And from that, it helped me to build a thriving business. It helped me to write a book. It helped me to write multiple books now, because now I am seeing how I am an answer to a problem that the world has. And whenever I am given seeds, whenever I'm giving trials, whenever I'm giving something that may seem like it's tough for me at the time, I am now able to look at that and view that as, okay, it was a problem, and now I understand the answer to it. So how can I help others that may be experiencing that same problem? And so that's what kind of took me on my journey from 2018 to now, from taking all of those kind of what most would call messy situations, but turning it into a message and then turning that into a thriving business.
What an amazing story, very inspiring, perseverance, resilience. Thank you so much for sharing. So many challenges. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
I would say the biggest challenge was, and if I'm honest, it was family, the separation in family, because, for me, I want to always make sure that I am taking care of home, I'm taking care of family. And it's funny that you started with that, because we'll keep using that as a thread to pull back on, because the Johnny Bravo in me wanted to prove. I wanted to prove. I wanted to prove. And so, the loss of the family was one of the hardest things for me. I mean, it probably took me into one of my darkest places, because, if I always felt like this, that if my family could not testify of the character, the integrity of who I am, then I don't care who else can. And so me taking that and just really kind of working through that, like, hey, how can I take that and become a better father, a better leader, a better husband, a better person, learning those things. And so through that journey, one of the hardest part was the separation of family, because I want to be a person of character and integrity. And during that time, that was one thing that was shaken in the journey.
Wow, that sure that many people can also, attest to something similar to that. That sort of that separation, that wanting to do your best, right? But let me ask you, you know, it's not all down either. You've also had a lot of success. But what I really like to hone in on is, and what I'm curious about is, when did you know finally, when you were going into the light, when did you know you were in the right?
It's funny that when you say it like that. I think I didn't know until I knew. And then let me break that down for you, because I think sometimes you think it's almost like working out. It's almost like working out. Like, you go to the gym, you work out, you work out, you work out, and then you look in the mirror, and then you still kind of look the same. But then it's just one day when it's been months and months and months and months and months. And then all of a sudden you kind of get a glimpse and you see that, wow, all of this was actually for that. And so to kind of connect that back, for me, it was, after sitting down and writing the book, and, the mantras that kind of came from that, you're right on schedule. And then when I was able to sit down and kind of look at, hey, this is Stephen 5 years ago. And this is Stephen after he walked through this, and he walked through this, and he walked through this. How much better, how much stronger, how much wiser he is today. And this isn't, oh, now that you've cracked 6 figures. Oh, now that you built this. It was looking at Stephen in the mirror of, wow, these are the things that I've gone through, and this is how I'm better. At that moment, that's when I realized, like, oh, I can see, and I'll use just a little cliche, this actually was because of that. And no one actually likes it. Like, no one likes this. But if this, and if I'll be honest, like, I wish there was a better way. And I think there could have been. I think, and I'm writing this in my book, I think there are some other ways. But for me, this way actually helped me get to who I am today. And I think it pushed me in ways that maybe in my comfort level I was in before, it wouldn't have pushed me to to think, to be creative, to humble myself, to learn, to grow, to become a better person. Those trials push me to the gym of life, and help me to become better.
That makes a lot of sense, and a lot of self-discovery, a lot of reflection. And it's funny though how humans work like that, just in general. We don't tend to want to make a change or make moves to make changes until we get so uncomfortable that we can't bear being where we are right at that second.
Yeah, it's almost like we don't want to eat healthy until the doctor tells us that you know hey, if you don't lose 30 pounds, you're gonna have to go through this surgery, or the doctor tells us now that you have this diagnosis, you can't do this or you can't do that anymore. And sometimes that's the that is the callus that pushes us to better. My dad used to say it this way: it's like experience is a great teacher, but it is not the best teacher. I mean, I think sometimes in life it's hard. It's hard, but I think other people's experience is the best teacher. However, some of us will only learn through our own experience. And I think for some, my journey will help them, but for others, they will have to go through a similar journey because that's the only way. And so that's sometimes that even in the process of helping people, some people will learn from my journey and others are going to say, no, but that doesn't apply to me. And then they'll have to experience some of the same experiences to understand.
No, I like that. I like that saying a lot. And it actually raises another question. In those processes, we often learn a lot about ourselves. What do you think was the most surprising thing that you learned about yourself in that entire process?
Yeah. So I think for me, the most surprising was, I'm a coach by nature. And what I mean by that is that like I have the mentality of, if something happens, it's like, get up, you can push harder, you can do more. Like, don't give up, don't quit. And however, in my journey, I don't think I had the same empathy for people and for people that I served with, the people that I led. And I think my biggest discovery was just empathy and compassion for people because it was just it's not that hard. Get up, you know, you could do 20 more push-ups or you can write 20 more essays. And now it's such an empathy for people where it's like, I understand. I understand where you are. How can I help you? How can I walk through this with you? And that empathy and compassion for people, I think it was completely missing in my leadership and even being a father and being a spouse. Like that compassion, that empathy was a big thing for me to even just be able to sit with people because there are so many people walking through so many different things. And so just to sometimes not really even have an answer, but be able to sit with them and say, you know what? Hey, we don't really have to say a lot. We don't really have to do a lot. Like I'm here.
No, I like that, and it's I don't think it's necessarily our fault that we don't inherently practice that. I mean, I do think that it's something that we all kind of have at birth, but then society kind of it's not that it tells us that we can't do it. It's just that it seems to steer us away from it. Social media, we tend to focus more on comparisons. We tend to focus more on getting that validation. And then we want to be, I think at the book core, we want to be helpful. But like you said, we just do it in ways that maybe aren't, necessarily empathetic. Like telling the goldfish they can do 20 more push-ups and you're a monkey, right? You got arms and the goldfish has got the little flippers, right? But what's your way of just, to somebody who wants to be more empathetic, what's your way of maybe practicing that muscle, so to speak?
Yeah. So I think some of it is just, another part of it is kind of coming out of yourself, stepping away from your own self. Because I think in empathy and compassion, it's actually, then this is the part where I say that even now when I talk to people, I kind of ask them like, hey, when we're having this conversation, are you venting? Are you asking for advice? Are you, and so in having compassion with people, I think for me, it's just now sitting with them in that space and actually just listening and being present with them. Because for me, when you share something with me, my problem solving brain already starts going off and I'm trying to solve the problem. And so in compassion and empathy, now I'm just saying like, I'm turning off of how I can fix this for you, how you can do better, what could be different. And I'm just saying at this moment, I just want to sit with you and be with you and understand like, hey, it hurts, man. I understand that loss hurts. And there's no problem that I'm trying to solve with you, but we want to understand this emotion. And I think that actually earns the respect of when you now want to problem solve or help people, because now they genuinely believe that you understand and you feel where they're coming from.
I really like what you touched on there, the problem solving brain. What's really ironic is that it tends to cause more problems than it solves. And let me explain in my line of reasoning. This applies to everywhere, right? But interpersonal relationships especially. When you have problems, let's say in a relationship, you immediately, if you value the relationship, you immediately want to fix it. And that leads to attempts to fix it and possibly desperate attempts to fix it, because the longer your brain goes without having a solution, the worse it feels. And it's difficult to kind of put that away. And it gets even worse when the things we're trying to fix happened in the past, because we can't fix anything in the past. So like I messed up my relationship with my spouse, or I messed up my work relationship, or whatever the case may be. We sit there and we'll try to fix something that happened in the past, or we'll try to fix something in the future that hasn't happened yet. So, you can say like, oh, I really want to be a better person. So this can be really debilitating. How do you kind of turn that off? I mean, you mentioned not off completely, obviously, but when it's not valuable, what are some questions that you could use in that case to kind of open the door to understanding?
Yeah. So I think one question is, you know, what is this person? The first question I had to ask is, what does this person need in this moment? And I think that's the first part where you said is cutting off the fix. Because most of the times people haven't even processed the emotion that they're feeling. And that, that's a whole thing that we can go on where it's like, I feel this way. And then you go into like the whole circle of emotions, and it's just sitting with them so they really figure out like what's that emotion, and then sitting with them in that, and then not fixing the problem, but maybe figuring out how we can walk from that emotion to now replacing that within positive emotion. And that's the difference between fixing. I'm not trying to fix the problem. I'm trying to guide our emotions, whatever this emotion is, to a positive emotion. And so maybe, the emotion started off, I feel alone. And then why do you feel alone? And then you get into the root emotion and then figuring out, okay, well, if the root emotion is unhappiness or the anger or any of those things, then how do we take that emotion and replace that emotion? We're not going to fix the problem, because remember, as you stated, we can't fix what happened in the past, but what we can do is change this emotion. And once we change the emotion, then our perspectives are in a space where we can now begin a direction towards solutioning. But I think we try to start with solutioning before we even change the feeling, the emotion, what's going on internally. And so we're trying to fix loneliness when we haven't really dealt with the overall emotion.
And that actually leads me into an interesting question. And there's definitely two divided schools of thought on this. One of them is that, emotions are energy in motion, right? So the more we kind of attach stories to it, narratives to it, the stronger they become. So do we go back and we revisit those emotions all the time and tie it to the story, or do we try to separate them and kind of not even label those emotions sometimes and just feel them and let them run their course? Because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, most emotions run their course in about 90 seconds, as long as you don't attach a story to them.
Yeah. And so it's funny that you say that. I think because even if we go back to writing a book, right? Go back to writing, and we can stay in the vein of writing a book. I think most people are writing books, and they're constantly writing a book. And in that emotion, they're constantly writing a book. And I don't want to say most, but many times the book that you're writing isn't leading to a solution, it's leading deeper in the problem. And so if it's an emotion that you're writing a story about, a business partner, or you're writing a story about the economy, you're writing a story, and the story that you're writing is leading you more down the problem. And this is where I step in. But if you're seeing this as a problem, how do you see yourself as the answer to the problem? And that starts with rewriting that story. And it starts with going back to when we said that emotion of, okay, this is how I feel, and I'm going to let that run its course. But what is the answer to this problem? And it's not a person, it's not, and it separates itself from that person, it separates from that thing. But how do I, as an individual, get to an answer to this problem that has nothing to do, and that's a whole nother thing, that has nothing to do with another person, but it simply is an answer that I can solve internally first. Because if you can't solve the problem internally first, you'll never solve the problem externally.
I really love that you said that. If you don't solve the problem internally, you're never going to solve the problem externally. And it goes back to something I wish somebody told me. I don't know, I guess we're going back 21 years, 22 years now, is that don't get in a relationship unless you're comfortable with yourself. Because most of us tend to get into those relationships because we're expecting the other person, or the other, even with jobs, like, or the other status, or the other house, to make us feel better, when at our core it's us, right?
All the time. And so we're trying to fix an external problem and never even address the internal one. It's like the old proverb says that if you get the sawdust out of your own eye, you can actually fix, and you'll see that it's not as big of a thing in someone else now, because your perspective changed, how you look at it changed. And that happened for me in so many different areas of my life, is that when I was able to take, pride and jealousy and anger and malice out of my own heart, it actually helped me see, like, man, like, I definitely handled that business decision so poorly, man. I handled certain people that were serving under me in such a bad way. And before, I seen them as the problem. And here's the reality. They still could be the problem. However, I see it in a different perspective, that if I would have looked at it differently, if I would have handled it differently internally, and I wasn't writing the story of, oh, they're out to get me. Oh, they don't think that I'm smart enough. Oh, they don't think that I can do this. And I wasn't writing that story about these people, it would have been completely different, where it was like, oh, maybe they just don't understand fully. Maybe they need a little bit more time of connecting. Maybe they are going through their own personal journey. And so I need to allow them space in their journey. And as their journey, they will understand and uncover things. And so I think when I did that inner work, everyone else became such less of a problem, because, it's like the grandmother said, it's like, I got 6 months to mind my business and 6 months to leave yours alone. And if I did that, it would be a completely different world, because I would be so bombarded doing my internal work that I don't even have time to address, well, why didn't you do A, B, and C? Because I'm doing the internal work.
I really like that. Just swinging back to writing for a moment, let me ask you, what is it about books that make them such a great medium? I mean, especially this day and age when we've got so many other mediums. I mean, we've got podcasts, we've got radio shows, we've got TV, we've got newsletters, we've got all sorts of other options. What makes a book such a good option?
Yeah. So one, and I'll just do stats first. Stats show that people who write a book, it's funny. It's funny anytime I use stats, because everybody says stats, or anybody can make stats, right? Anybody can make stats. But statistics do show that people who write books ultimately come off as smarter, more intelligent, and have more authority, right? That's the first part. However, books are so evergreen. They're so evergreen in knowledge and so such evergreen in just how they can be used. And so for me, I believe a book, it's such a great piece because you take all of the problems, the solutions that you have, and you put them in one place. And the way that I look at it as a book is like the idea in your head is 2 fish and 5 loaves. And everything that you just spoke about, podcasts and all these other things, I think they can be breadcrumbs from your book. And so, when I wrote my first book, it also became something that was broken. And once it was broken, I can take a chapter from my book and create a podcast. I can take a chapter from my book and I can create a speaking curriculum out of it. I can take a few chapters out of my book and I can create a coaching program out of it. And so this is why I feel a book is so powerful, because it takes all of your expertise and they put them together. And once you put them together, then it can be broken and it creates such a wealth of opportunities for incomes and streams of incomes based off of that one book. And so you take a book, you take 12 chapters and you take those 12 chapters and each chapter you have 4 sections. So you can say, I have chapter 1, and for you do podcasts. That could be 4 weeks of podcasts with one chapter. And then you take that, multiply that times 12, you have all of the podcasts you need for a year inside of a book. And so it's so many multiple different things you can do when you actually take the answer to a problem and put it in a book. You have your newsletter, you have all of those things inside of that book.
You know what? I really love that. You can repurpose that content into all those different mediums. My question to you might be, let's say I come to you and I say, I really want to write a book, but maybe I don't know what to write. Could we also, if we've been, the word prolific comes up, but I don't think that's a really great word to use, but in lieu of a better word, if you have a lot of newsletters already, you have a lot of blog posts, maybe you have a podcast, can you take that same process and turn it into a book?
Yep. And so, so the first thing with that, I think most people, I would say this, if you are a speaker, if you are a coach, if you are a podcaster, if you are a blogger, I genuinely believe that you've already have the materials for a book. You just haven't packaged it in a book. And so all of that material, it can be repurposed and it can be brought together because there are nuggets in all of that drip with the answer to the problem that you solve. And I'll continue to say that I think that every single person was created to solve a problem, and you are the answer to the problem. Now, the problem is, and maybe this is one of your questions. It's like, well, what if everyone else has already done it? And it's like, that's great, but you are the answer to a problem. And I believe that the answer to the problem that you have will change the world that you impact. The problem is that when people see their world impact in comparisons to another, for some, your world impact may be 50. For some, your world impact may be 500. For some, your world impact may be 5 million. But we can't minimize the answer to our problem based off of comparing it to someone else, because there could be someone in a very confused and dark place that is waiting for the answer. Maybe they have an eating disorder and you walk through some kind of eating disorder and you have steps or knowledge or wisdom to help them with this eating disorder. And it may just be 5 people that you help, but know that those 5 people's lives are forever changed because of the problem that you helped them solve. For some, it may be that you struggle with finances, but you found a way that you were once $40,000 or $90,000 in debt, and now you have multiple duplexes, and you now have started all of these nonprofits, and you've done it when you were first broke, busted, and disgusted, and now you take that and you teach it to a few other people, and now you have opened up a school of entrepreneurs and philanthropies that are doing amazing work, but they found that answer to a problem off of your story. And so whatever the impact is, you have to be okay with that and says, I did my piece in the world to make it a better place.
Wow. I really like that. I definitely like that about the impact part for sure. Stephen, this has been a really great conversation. We are coming up pretty close to the time. Is there anything that you wish I would have asked, but didn't ask, or anything you wish we would have covered but didn't cover today?
Well, I wouldn't say wouldn't ask. I just would love to share with the listeners and audience today is that, listen, you have a story down on the inside of you. You have a message that the world has been waiting for. And it doesn't matter if it's simple, if it's profound, or it's legendary. The longer you keep silent, the longer other people will suffer in silence to a problem that they're going through, that you've already walked through, that you have the answer to. And I'll say this just as we wrap up. The one thing that I learned in my journey is that people always say, I wish I knew. But what I've learned with the wish I knew is that every time I write a book, I'm writing a book to speak to the 2 years ago me, the 5-year ago me. And some people right now are listening to the podcast and they've walked through a journey and it's super profound and powerful. And you don't have to say another day, I wish I knew. Take that you wish you knew, put it in a book, and allow someone else that is walking through that same thing you walked through 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, to now find freedom in the solution that you have. So listen, if that's you, I would love to walk through that journey with you guys, help you make your message, a thriving business, because you are an answer to a problem.
Wow, what a powerful note to end the show on. Just before we go, what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you or to?
So you can reach me at itsyournextstep.org. That's my website, or you can reach me on social media at Stephen Foster, YNS. I would love to connect with you guys. And listen, there's a link on my website, and if you click the link on my website, I will send you guys a free copy of my book, Your Right on Schedule. So if you go ahead and click the link and on my website, I'm sending out a free copy to everyone who's watching this podcast, just to let you know that you're right on schedule and that your story matters.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And once again, to our listeners, don't worry about grabbing a pen and paper. We are going to have that in the show notes, so it's very easy for you to find. Stephen, once again, thank you so much for being on the show. And to all our listeners, thanks once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation or inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.